So making money through sports betting is hard enough as it is. You have to find a bet that is at better odds than the bookmaker odds suggest. And when you place that bet with a sportsbook or however you choose to bet, you've got to overcome those odds in order to be able to win. But very often people come across another problem, and that is that the sportsbook or the bookmaker or whatever service you're using decides not to pay out. It was something that I encountered very early on in my career, and it's amazing to still see it going on today. But worse than that, they're getting much sneakier in terms of the way that they refuse to pay out. And that is what we're going to talk about in this video. So the first thing I want to point out on this video is that any proceeds that I get from YouTube advertising revenue will go straight to the person affected by this particular issue. It dawned on me the other day that this is quite a sensible thing to do. If you like or share this video, that will improve the chances of this person getting some compensation for the loss that they've made or the non-gain that they've made. You'll learn a little bit more in a second. But also it may encourage other people to come forward and we can get some more publicity for these sort of cases of what appears to be malpractice. So yeah, that was the first thing that I wanted to say at the start of this video. So in case you're not aware, I do bet on sports for a living. That's what I've been doing for a very long period of time. And my preferred method is betting exchanges, for the simple reason that when you lodge and place bets on a betting exchange, they always stand and you will get paid out regardless of however things sort of played out. And that's just the way that betting exchanges work. It's a place where you can exchange bets with other people and there is no third party that may not wish to pay you out. But I have been refused payouts in the past when I was with bookmakers. And going back to the earlier part of my career, we could go all the way back, but that's too far and it will show my age. But basically in the early 90s, I came up with a betting system on football where I would lose fairly frequently, but every now and again I would get a large payoff. And when I was confident that this system would work, I would go off around bookmakers, place loads of bets, and they were happy to accept them for ages until such time as that first big win came out. I went to collect that win and they basically said, oh, hold on a second, we need to refer this to head office. And I thought, well, that's unfair, and ended up going to Trading Standards and Citizens Advice Bureau and all of these sort of things. But that sort of, until betting exchanges came along, that basically ended my betting career. But we're now sort of 25 years on from when betting exchanges were born, but the sort of malpractice that we have when you get a large win doesn't seem to have changed at all. So my early experiences with trying to win money betting were tainted by the fact that people kept refusing to pay out. And that was why I waited until betting exchanges came along in order to start my betting career all over again. But when I first started on betting exchanges, I was arbing. So I was backing with a bookmaker, laying off on an exchange and netting a profit between the two. And that worked really well until such time as a bookmaker refused to pay out. I backed something at 125 to 1, laid it off on the exchange for a huge liability, and they refused to pay out. There was lots of toing and froing, and they were arguing one point or another, and I thought, well, I'm getting nowhere. So I actually went to the head office and confronted their managing director, at which point they obviously figured out that I was too much trouble and hassle, and they did actually pay out. But of course, that option isn't open to a lot of people nowadays, and you can't resolve things always in that particular manner. But also, things have become a lot more sinister more recently. So there are legitimate reasons why bookmakers may not pay out. It's there to protect themselves, of course. But, if they think there's something funny going on in the underlying event itself, or they've made a genuine mistake, or perhaps you're up to something a little bit weird, then those are the reasons that they could theoretically refuse to pay out. And that is within their remit. They are allowed to do that. The problem is it's conflated over a number of years to become an excuse not to pay out at all, even if there's substantial evidence counter to the sort of reasons that they're giving that they should be paying out. If you look at the way that legislation has changed, if you transfer any money to anybody for any certain amount, you have to undergo an AML check of some sort. AML stands for anti-money laundering. They're just making sure that you're not transferring money in to lose it to somebody else deliberately, or all these sort of things. You're not washing money through the system. But of course, things have got even more complicated recently because of affordability checks. Because the affordability checks that bookmakers are using in a very widespread manner now, encouraged by the Gambling Commission, is to ensure that people can actually afford to bet the amounts that they expect. And this sort of gets us to the crux of why the situation that we're beginning to see now that is becoming more prevalent. We're beginning to see bookmakers asking for information that really they shouldn't be and that they have no right to be, and then they're refusing payouts thereafter based upon all of that evidence that they've seen, which I think is really bang out of order. So let's talk specifically about the issue at hand here. Somebody opened an account with 32 Red, or they had an account with 32 Red, and they started placing a number of bets. It was up and down and all over the place, but eventually they went on a nice run and they ended up with 19 grand in their account. At which point they decided that they would like to have some of that back. At which point 32 Red started asking for documentation. So here's the big issue with all of this sort of stuff. Why the hell are these people not asking for documentation when the money is deposited? They seem to be happy to let the money be deposited, and it's only when you get a payout do all of the questions start to come. And in this particular occasion, they asked their client for significant amounts of documentation, and they provided all of that documentation to them. But it was at that point that 32 Red basically wrote back and said, oh, actually, you're in breach of this particular terms, and therefore was confiscating your money. And I haven't made that word up. They actually said that they were confiscating the money. Now, the thing is, they actually listed on there a whole range of individual items that they could potentially be in breach with, but they didn't mention which particular one it was. So how are you supposed to compete with that? How are you supposed to go out? I mean, there's no sort of sense of discussion, no sense of, oh, it's this one specifically. What it feels like is that 32 Red have basically asked for all of this information, as they are now obliged to do and encouraged by the Gambling Commission to do. And all they've done is they've trawled through all of that data just to try and find some technical breach of their terms and conditions to refuse to pay out. It absolutely stinks. Now, I could be completely wrong on this, in which case I would invite 32 Red not only to talk to me and say what specifically the issue is, but also talk to your client as well. You've completely backed off of it and not actually given any indication as to what the breach is. It's very glib and broad. Not only that, but you ask for all of this documentation, which it appears you've used to try and find a way to back out from this payout. It's absolutely horrific. And I mean, you know, this sort of thing seems to be getting more and more common, especially since we've got these affordability restrictions or measures coming into place, where the bookmakers are being asked or being demanded that they need significant amounts of documentation. And there are cases of either people closing or restricting accounts or refusing to pay out because they've seen, you know, they're asking for information about, you know, you transferred some money to your mate. What's all that about? Can we have his bank accounts? It's gone absolutely crazy. It's mental, the whole thing. It's shot to bits. But you always get this undercurrent that feels like a lot of these bookmakers have just really sort of evolved a bit from the experience that I had all those years ago. And they're just using more and more complex measures to find technical breaches of terms and conditions to refuse to pay out. It's absolutely appalling. So I wanted to do this video to highlight that and hopefully to help this particular person get a bit more awareness of it, stop other people from falling for it, or if you have actually become victim to this sort of thing, to let me know and we can raise further awareness of this. Because if there's one particular group or a particular method that people are using to refuse to pay out or being unreasonable, then I think that that really needs to be out there and highlighted, especially with new legislation that's likely to be brought in by the Gambling Commission. We can't have this situation where people are basically having to give across their entire life story and their bank accounts and their friends' bank accounts and their dogs and their sisters and their mothers, nieces, brothers, aunts' bank accounts and statements and credit cards and P60s and stuff, just to either open an account or to get a payout. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, I hope that we can sort of help push this resolution forward. But if you've been affected by this video or you've seen similar sort of behaviour, let me know and hopefully we can do something to address it. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, any proceeds from this video will go directly to the person affected. So thank you for that on their behalf. If you want to engage with this person directly about this issue, I've included a link to their social media profile so that we can raise a little bit more awareness of what 32 Red have done on this particular occasion. And if you've also fallen foul of this, or via Unibet, which is also part of the same group as 32 Red, then let me know. Maybe there's a bit of a pattern developing here, but one thing is for certain is that we should let everybody know about it.